At first glance, the Mekong River basin in Cambodia looks calm and welcoming. The river is wide, the banks are covered in green vegetation, and the landscape feels peaceful. But for the communities living here, the river has never been as simple as it appears. For decades, the Mekong has been both a lifeline and a barrier. The forests around it are home to venomous snakes, insects, and wild animals. Beneath the water are species that make many outsiders uneasy. And during the rainy season, the river becomes unpredictable, turning everyday travel into a serious risk. Yet thousands of people have built their lives along these banks. For many years, the only way to cross the river in this area was by boat. Small vessels carried farmers, traders, and families back and forth between the two sides. But when seasonal floods arrived, the currents became dangerous. Boats could capsize easily, and what should have been a short journey sometimes became life-threatening. Now that situation is about to change. China has invested roughly $200 million to construct what will become Cambodia's longest bridge across this part of the Mekong River. After about 2.5 years of construction, the main bridge structure has reached around 96% completion. Once finished, the bridge is expected to make travel safer, shorten transportation times, and potentially stimulate economic activity across the region. More importantly, it could become a critical connection point linking Laos, Vietnam, and Thailand, turning this area into a regional transportation hub. But the bridge raises a larger question. Why would China fund such a large project in a relatively remote part of Cambodia? And what might this project mean for the region's future? In northeastern Cambodia lies Kratie Province, a city built along the Mekong River. The local economy revolves around two main pillars: ecology and river transportation. Tourism plays a role here, but the more important asset is Kratie Port. Through the Mekong River system, this port connects directly to Phnom Penh Port, which handles roughly a quarter of Cambodia's national cargo volume. Kratie acts as a processing and transfer point for agricultural goods moving through the region. By 2023, cargo passing through this port accounted for over 60% of the province's river transport activity. Every day, trucks and boats move large quantities of goods across the region. Much of it is agricultural produce coming from the fertile plains in Cambodia's central and western areas. Agriculture remains the backbone of the Cambodian economy. More than 80,000 square kilometers of plains provide fertile land and reliable water sources. The Mekong River alone supplies over 65 billion cubic meters of water each year, supporting large-scale farming. In recent years, the Cambodian government has tried to modernize the sector. Programs such as the Million-Ton Rice Export Plan encourage farmers to adopt new technologies, build rice mills, and increase productivity. But infrastructure has not always kept pace with agricultural growth. And that's where the Mekong River becomes a paradox. It supplies water and supports trade, but at the same time it divides communities and slows transportation. What if the river that fuels Cambodia's agriculture has also been quietly limiting its economic potential? Without a bridge, vehicles must travel long detours around the river, increasing costs and travel times. For tourists, traders, and farmers alike, this makes the region less accessible. Cambodia had long wanted to solve this problem, but for years, building a bridge here seemed unrealistic. Large infrastructure projects often depend on outside investment, especially in developing economies. Cambodia recognized the importance of a bridge across this section of the Mekong. However, the engineering challenges were significant, and the financial return was expected to be slow. Many potential investors simply walked away after evaluating the project. Eventually, Cambodian officials turned to China. In 2022, Cambodia formally asked China for assistance in constructing the bridge. After negotiations, a Shanghai-based Chinese company agreed to take on the project. The structure, known as the Kratie Mekong River Bridge, will stretch over 1,700 meters across the river. The bridge deck will measure 13.5 meters wide, and the total investment of about $200 million includes not only the bridge itself, but also a 33.5-kilometer network of connecting roads. Construction officially began in January 2023, and the project is expected to be completed by September 2025. The bridge starts near Highway 7 in Craty City and will eventually connect to the planned National Highway 60B. Once integrated with regional roads, the route could link Cambodia more efficiently with Laos, Vietnam, and Thailand. But infrastructure is rarely just about transportation. It often reflects deeper economic strategies. For countries like Cambodia, building large infrastructure projects independently can be extremely difficult. Limited financial resources often mean governments must rely on external funding. By the end of 2024, Cambodia's total public debt was expected to reach between $12 billion and $12.3 billion, with foreign debt accounting for nearly 99% of that amount. This structure reflects a common approach among developing nations, exchanging long-term economic opportunities for immediate infrastructure investment. From China's perspective, Southeast Asia is strategically important. Investing in transportation networks helps strengthen economic ties while expanding regional influence. Cambodia is particularly attractive because it combines resource potential with political willingness to cooperate. For example, Cambodia possesses notable iron ore reserves. The Phnom Deck and Bandeng ore belts contain an estimated 7 million tons of deposits, with iron concentrations ranging from 51 to 56%. At the same time, China remains the world's largest importer of iron ore. In 2024 alone, China imported roughly 1.237 billion tons, representing about 72% of global iron ore trade. This raises an interesting possibility. What if infrastructure projects like this bridge are not just about transportation, but about quietly reshaping future supply chains? Better roads and bridges can eventually make resource extraction, logistics, and trade significantly easier. Building a bridge across the Mekong River is far from simple. The river carries a large volume of water, and its terrain is, honestly, pretty complex. Strong currents and deep riverbeds create major challenges for construction teams. To address these problems, engineers had to modify equipment and adjust construction methods. After several days of technical discussions, the Chinese team redesigned an existing crane ship to enable precise placement of underwater steel casings. This adaptation helped solve the issue of limited heavy construction equipment available locally. But underwater work was only part of the challenge. A bridge longer than 1.7 kilometers requires carefully planned structural support. Multiple piers must be installed along the riverbed, and their design must account for decades of heavy traffic. Even if trucks weighing tens of thousands of kilograms cross the bridge regularly, the structure must remain stable. To handle this, engineers deployed large integrated transport and erection machines capable of moving and installing massive bridge components. These machines run on 88 wheels, support loads of up to 1,000 tons, and can install bridge segments up to 40 meters long. Such equipment allows construction in difficult environments, including rivers and coastal areas. The bridge itself uses a variable cross-section pre-stressed concrete continuous rigid frame system, designed to maintain structural stability over long spans. The main piers are built as box structures, while side piers use solid concrete forms. Approach sections rely on prefabricated T-beams, with 30-meter beams weighing about 70 tons and 50-meter beams weighing around 90 tons. Each component is lifted into place using specialized bridge erection machinery until the entire structure forms a continuous system. Engineers also introduced several technical improvements. An automatic punching device upgraded the traditional drilling process, improving underwater piling stability and increasing efficiency by over 20%. Meanwhile, a CNC steel cage wire winding machine improved the precision of reinforcement structures inside the bridge piles. Even the anchoring systems used during construction were carefully designed to keep suspended platforms stable while supporting both the weight of the bridge and the construction loads. Concrete segments were poured using a balanced cantilever method, casting sections from both sides of the structure until they met in the middle with millimeter-level accuracy. In large infrastructure projects, these small technical details often determine whether a bridge lasts decades or centuries. The Mekong Bridge is not the only infrastructure project China is supporting in Cambodia. Another major development is the Funan Canal, a project expected to reshape Cambodia's access to global trade. The canal will stretch about 180 kilometers, with a width of 100 meters and a depth of 5.4 meters, allowing ships of up to 3,000 tons to pass through. Construction is scheduled to take 4 years, with completion expected around 2028. The total investment is estimated at $1.7 billion. Once finished, the canal will provide a direct waterway connecting Phnom Penh to the sea. Currently, much of Cambodia's shipping relies on routes through Vietnamese ports. The new canal could reduce that dependency significantly. Official projections suggest the canal could cut Cambodia's shipping through Vietnam by around 70%, while generating about $88 million per year in transportation revenue. By 2050, that figure could reach $570 million annually. Shipping costs may also fall by roughly 1/3, because Cambodian cargo would no longer need to pay certain transit fees. If those projections hold true, the canal could give Cambodia something it has never fully had before: independent maritime access for its exports. Over the past decade, China has steadily expanded infrastructure investment across Southeast Asia. Geographically, the region sits at the crossroads between Asia, Australia, the Pacific Ocean, and the Indian Ocean. Control of key routes here has enormous economic implications. Strengthening transportation corridors can make trade between China and other regions faster and more reliable. Some analysts argue that infrastructure investments also help China build long-term influence across the region. But there is another perspective worth considering. What if many Southeast Asian countries see these projects less as geopolitical competition and more as practical development opportunities? For nations seeking roads, ports, and railways, infrastructure funding often matters more than global rivalries. Despite occasional pressure from Western governments, many countries in the region continue expanding cooperation with China. For example, China and Malaysia signed a broad cooperation agreement in 2025, covering areas such as artificial intelligence, intellectual property protection, agricultural exports, visa policies, panda conservation, and railway infrastructure. These agreements suggest that economic collaboration in Southeast Asia is still growing rather than shrinking. As of July 2025, the Craty Mekong River Bridge had reached about 96% completion, with the main structure successfully connected. Once the remaining work is finished, the bridge will finally link two regions that have been separated by the river for generations. For local residents, the most immediate benefit will be simple, safer, and faster travel. For Cambodia's economy, the effects could be broader. Agricultural goods may move more efficiently. Tourism could increase. And trade routes across the region may gradually shift. But the most interesting question may take years to answer. What if this bridge, built in a relatively quiet corner of the Mekong River, eventually becomes a key link in a much larger network of trade across Southeast Asia? Sometimes the most important infrastructure projects don't begin as global headlines. They start as a single crossing over a river that once divided two communities, and slowly they begin to connect much more than that.